warm welcome to
Good
everyone.
morning.
Uh, yeah. We wish you a very happy, safe, healthy, and prosperous New Year to all of you and our MTTS family. And 2020 has been a tough year for mankind. We wish that 2021 will be much better than that. All this pandemic situation will come to an end and life will be on track. So today is the second day of our series of lectures arranged by Karilip Math Club of MTTS alumni in collaboration with MTTS Trust. The topic is Constructability and Old Enigma by Dr. Parthasarathi Mukhopadhyay. So geometry is in everywhere. It is good to start a new year with some geometry lectures. We also invited Professor S. Kumar Sen, but due to some pre-scheduled work, he is unable to join here. Then we requested him for a video message. So here it is. Ilan Charan Bhaiya, can you share that?
Yeah.
Happy New Year to all. The 2020 has been a challenging year for the entire world and of course also for the MTTS family. But MTTS family with its characteristics, creativity and innovation had tided over this challenging times very, very creditably. If people notice that our activities have not been reduced. In fact, we extended our activities and to cater to nook and corner of the country. So it has been really wonderful that way. But we of course hope 2020, 2021 will offer us back our classrooms and the real interactive sessions for which MTTS is justifiably famous. It is really fitting that we start the new year with a lecture on a topic, the so-called geometric problems or geometric problems of Greek geometric problems had a very long history. And its a solution resulted in the development of fantastic amount of mathematics. It opened you a lot of new vistas in mathematics. So I really thank Professor Parthasarathi Mukhopadhyaya to accepted the invitation by the Math Club of MTTS alumni to give these lectures. I'm sure all of you will enjoy and start a very great academic journey during this year. My best wishes for all the listeners, viewers, and the MTTS family. A very peaceful, healthy, happy, and academically stimulating year. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Now I call Mr. Ilan Charan, research fellow in IIT Madras. He will recap the previous day's lecture, and now it's up to you.
Thank you. Very happy New Year to all. Let it be very healthy and prosperous one. Um, uh, yeah. So I would like to recap before starting today's lecture and say what happened in yesterday's sessions. So we all have used geometric boxes, and we had compass and divider. And Sir started with having this asking this question that is there something that a divider can do which a compass cannot? So starting from this question and looking at behind how all these things have evolved. He took us to Greek geometers and what are the things that they tools that they have used and what are the results that they have produced. So the Greeks mainly used two tools. One is unmarked ruler, that is a scale that we use today without marking of units like centimeters, and all measurements are not there. Second is collapsible compass, which is a compass where we cannot replicate. Once we lift the compass from the paper, the same radius cannot be will not be stable. The compass will not be stable. It will range. So that is the place where divider has been used to replicate a given line segment. So he mentioned that at the time of Greek, they have proved that just with this collapsible compass and unmarked ruler, we can replicate the use whatever the divider is used for. So he proved that, which is called as compass equivalent theorem, which shows that whatever we do with divider, replicating a line segment, the same process can be replicated just by using unmarked ruler and the collapsible compass, which involved four steps, which can be done just by using in a single step using the modern compass, which is a combination of both compass and divider. But still, with those two, it was possible to do. Those days, they had this philosophy of just using the unmarked ruler and collapsible complex and nothing, using other things, especially the measurements, were considered inferior. So with these approach, they tried to bring a lot of results, but they were struggled and they could not solve the four specific problems which sir mentioned yesterday. That is to trisect a given arbitrary angle just by using unmarked ruler and collapsible complex. Then given a cube of say certain volume, and constructing a cube of a volume twice of the given volume. So that was another problem which was not able to be solved just by using unmarked ruler and collapsible complex. Then to construct a regular heptagon, a regular seven-sided polygon, and the fourth one was to construct a square having equal area that of a given circle. So to go beyond, by sticking to these two rules of just using collapsible compass and unmarked ruler, it wasn't possible to do. So sir showed, introduced how these things were proved by using more tools. The one more tool which was used was Neusis, which is just marked ruler. That is a ruler where we can mark a fixed length and one single length, and then we can use that. That is Neusis. Then he showed how the first three problems can be solved using this tool and few more other tools. And then finally told about some more how Ramanujan handled the fourth problem and what more are there. So to start with the first problem, that to give an trisect and give an arbitrary angle, he used Neusis together with a straight edge unmarked ruler and compass. Archimedes, he showed that how Archimedes proved that given any arbitrary angle can be trisected just by using these three. And also he showed one more proof, tomahawk construction, which is a shoemaker's knife. Then he came to how to duplicate the cube. That is, given a cube of say volume A cube, how to construct a cube of volume 2A cube. That especially finding the side of such a cube was the main thing. So using a right angle frame, another tool which does not even use unmarked ruler and compass, Archimedes was able to construct a cube of volume 2A cube. So he was able to get the side of a cube whose volume is 2A cube. Then constructing a cube root of a given number using marked ruler. So this again used previously known results from geometry like Menelaus theorem, and the proof was from the book Euclid and Beyond. they again used the tools that like beyond just they did not restrict themselves to unmarked ruler and uh, collapsible complex. They also use Neusis. Then the third question was constructing a seven-sided polygon. Before going to that question, he showed how simple it is to construct hexagon, and he showed Euclid's method of constructing regular pentagon using golden triangle, which involved golden section. And also at that time, once n-gon is constructed, constructing a 2n-gon was easier. So also he also showed how Euclid's construction of 15-gon was, which cannot be done using the known thing. Then beyond Euclid, the regular heptagon construction by Francois Waite, which again used Neusis, then tomahawk construction, then Neusis construction, which is mentioned in the book Crockett Johnson, where heptagon of a given side length can be constructed. So such constructions are possible when we increase, like go beyond just collapsible compass and unmarked ruler. So these three things were not possible when we stick to just collapsible compass and unmarked ruler. When we increase our tools, these are possible. But coming to the fourth problem, which is constructing a square having equal area of a given circle. So this problem sums to finding length of the square, and in particular, it comes to can we just by using ruler and complex can we construct root pi? This problem was approached by Ramanujan, but in both in his notebook, which sir showed yesterday, it wasn't possible to explicitly note down, but Ramanujan made a very good approximation to root pi. So these problems, he also mentioned that such a thing is not possible by ruler and compass, which he's going to speak much more in today's session. So I request her to take over, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. A very, very good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year. And that was an excellent recap. Everything precisely has been pointed out that we have discussed yesterday. So let me just begin from where we left it. As Subramanian just pointed out, yesterday we have seen that if we deviate from that artificial norm of restricting ourselves to these two instruments, that was a Greek, a Platonian idea of geometry, then we can manage even those four constructions, at least three of them. The fourth one is a bit different. This involving that pi. Right now he was pointing it out. That is in a bit different class, as we will be able to justify later. But the first three can be managed. If we allow something, say, like a marked ruler or angle trisector, then they can be managed. Today, we will try to explain the thing from other perspective. That, you see, if we try something like these constructions, maybe for 1,000 years people are trying and everybody failing, well, that is not a justification to claim that this is impossible. Mathematically, failure of doing something does not justify its impossibility. You have to prove that impossibility by argument. That was somehow beyond, somehow impossible within the framework of geometry, Euclidean geometry. That's how people were sort of, convinced that possibly the solution exists, only it is somehow not coming to me. So maybe I try harder and then someday I will, it just will sort of flash and I'll get the solution even by ruler and compass. Now that continued for a long period of time, almost 2000 years. My story, the storyline now advances by almost 2000 years. And where now algebra comes in. And the problem of this constructibility by these machines will be seen to get translated in algebraic language. And therefrom, we'll try to justify the limits of the construction ability of these two instruments algebraically. And thereby, as a byproduct, we'll come to justify why these two instruments, the straightedge and collapsible compass, will never ever be able to tackle those three constructions. In fact, the fourth one as well. It is beyond the possibility of those instruments. That will be proved directly, but in the language of algebra. So for that, we need to know how to translate this problem of geometry into the language of algebra. We'll do that today and justify this impossibility claims. Yesterday, it was sort of how it was possible in a different way. Today, we will justify why these are really impossible, why it makes no sense to spend time on that anymore. It has been decided mathematically, right? So the major player here, the first big name is Gauss. So allow me to share my slides. Just give me 1 minute. I'll go back to that. There. So that is your algebra, beginning of the modern approach. Now this gentleman Gauss, he was born in 1777 from a very poor family, you know. His father was a helper of a mason. But it is said that in his contemporary time, this Gauss left his impression in almost every single development of mathematics and physics that took place during his time. It's obviously for that reason he is referred to as the Prince of Mathematics. Now you see, it is only when he is 19 years old, he wrote a book, Disquisitione Arithmetic. In 1796, he comes with this result that for an odd prime p, the regular p-gon, you know, this particular book is about basically about numbers, where he is discovering and stating all those famous results of, you know, modularity, quadratic reciprocity, and all those great results of number theory. Last chapter of the book is dedicated to the construction of discussion on the possibility of construction of regular polygon, particularly regular 17-gon. He gave a discussion there. And there he proves this result that for odd primes p, the regular p-gon is constructible if and only if p is a prime Fermat number. So this is called a Fermat prime. You know, numbers of this form 2 to the power n plus 1. These numbers are called Fermat primes. It's again a great name there. Pierre de Fermat, a French who was not mathematician by profession, but he was, you know, more of a mathematician than many professional mathematicians, did extraordinary things. But this is one attempt, sort of false attempt, we would say right now, but Fermat didn't understand that. He once proposed this formula 2 to the power n plus 1 with an expectation that this will give only prime numbers as output. If you put the value of n, say you put n is equal to 0, that's how Fermat tried it. N is equal to 0, then it's 2 to the power 0 being 1, it's giving you 3. Then you put n is equal to 1, then it turns out to be 5. N is equal to 2, it's 17, and then 3, and then 4. Well, up to that, Fermat actually checked and got convinced that this will spit out only prime numbers. He's not claiming that all prime numbers, but this formula will spit only prime number. That's how this formula came into being. But in 1732, great Euler, Leonhard Euler, he proved the very next number is not prime. In this formula, you just take the very next number. Then Euler directly found that 641 is a factor of that. So this chain breaked. And amazingly, I'll just go to the next slide for this, showing this particular present status of these Fermat numbers. It's amazing that till date, no other Fermat number has been proved to be prime. It's an amazing thing. And more amazing is, you know, beyond F11, till date, we don't know the complete factorization of these numbers. Yes, in spite of having the mainframe supercomputers, it is beyond us till date. Because perhaps you know, integer factorization is a great limitation still for human knowledge. Computer does what we ask it to do. If we can make a proper algorithm, only then it can work fast. So this algorithm is still beyond us. Integer factorization for arbitrary large integers. And in fact, that is, you know, a boon in disguise, because that actually plays a pivotal role in the development of another branch of science, which is called cryptography, particularly systems like RSA. It works on this inability. It's working on this inability of humankind to factorize arbitrary large numbers in enough fast manner. But that's a different story altogether. We are not getting into that. Just wanted to share with this. It's so amazing. The first one, this was done by Euler, as I told you. F5, there is a factor 641. Then F6, 7, you can see these are factors. And from 8 onwards, the factors are so large. This P62 actually stands for, it means it's a prime of 62 digits. And so on up to F11, a complete factorization is there. The last factor is a 564 digit prime. That's why it is not written over there. But then from that onward, if you look at the right side of my screen, F12, 13, 14, so on, they are known to be non-prime because at least one factor has been found. But complete factorization is still beyond scope. Still could not have been achieved. Right, like this right-hand side, you see this C something means this is these many digited integer, which is not prime. It's a composite integer of these many digits. And what is on? It's an open problem. It's an open problem. It has not been theoretically proved that no other Fermat number is a prime. Only those first 5, I mean F0 to F4, they are known to be prime by direct verification. But that no other Fermat number is prime is still an open question. It's not been proved. Neither there is a counterexample. As you can see, the left-hand side of my screen, a very recent development, 5th October 2020, this particular number, you see F of, now you see that staggering number 1823395 So it is that's 2 to the power this number plus 1, that's the Fermat number. And that is proved to be a composite once again, because this is a factor of that. Now that's a complete different ballgame. You know, all these factors, as you can see in the complete list that is available right now, these factors, they do have a definite pattern, which is easily visible. Something into 2 to the power something plus 1. Well, there's a theory what kind of factors this Fermat number should have if they are factorizable and all such things. That's a very beautiful thing, but we are not getting into that. My point here is to refer this Fermat number because for our topic, we require this result. The great Gauss gave this result that regular P gon is constructible if and only P is a prime Fermat number. So about this result, Gauss actually became so fascinated with this result that it is said that he was caught in two minds, whether to pursue theology or mathematics. This particular result, he got so fascinated with his own understanding and discovery that 17 gon can be constructed, for which he has given a method, not for construction, but for the constructibility. Once again, a paradigm shift in the history of mathematics. Here is a proof presented by Gauss that logically justify the existence of something, but doesn't tell you how it is to be done. proofs nowadays in modern understanding, we can categorize it in two different categories. One is a constructible proof, the other is existential. Now, this is an example of an existential proof. Gauss gives a logical argument justifying that a regular 17 gon exists in the sense of that construction. But that proof nowhere tells you how to actually construct that 17 gon. That would have been a constructive proof. See, so that's a very, very important example of an existential proof that Gauss proposed at that point of time. And he became so fascinated with his own understanding of this fact, because 17 was the very next challenge. See, 3, 5 were already known from Euclidean time. 17 was beyond Euclid, and 17 Gauss mathematically saw that it has to be done, and he didn't actually give the construction. That was given by someone else later. And then comes the other numbers, 257 and 65537. I'll come to their story later. Within few more years, 1801, when he actually published the book, he improved the result further and gave this result. A regular polygon of n sides. Now there is no restriction to this n. It's not necessarily prime. It is constructible if and only if n has the form either 2 to the power k or 2 to the power k into p1, p2, pi, where p's are distinct Fermat primes and k is greater than or equal to 0. So either it has even number of sides, 2 to the power k, or it's 2 to the power k into these typical primes, not just arbitrary primes, Fermat primes, and there has to be distinct Fermat primes. That is the result he proved. Actually, he didn't actually prove the if and only if both part. He proved the sufficiency part only, and conjectured the necessity, told that it will be done, it can be done, but it is beyond the scope of present book. Some such comment he has made. I'll show you the comment exactly. But within a few more years, this gentleman, Pierre Wantzel, 1837, he came into the picture, and he formally proved the impossibility of this particular necessity part of the theorem, and using that, the impossibility of trisection of an angle in general by straightedge and compass. He also proved that it is not possible to duplicate the cube. That's in 1837. And within few more years, 1882, Ferdinand Lindemann, he proved that the fourth problem, that squaring of a circle, is also impossible, but that is from a complete different angle, proving that this pi is transcendental. And this was the result he proved, that e to the power alpha is transcendental for every non-zero algebraic number alpha. How come it is relevant? Let me give a little bit of idea, a sketch of the argument. We have already seen for the fourth problem, that is squaring of a circle, the crux of the whole story was like this. If you have a circle of unit radius, its area is pi, and you want a square of that area, that means length of the side of the square has to be root pi. So it was understood that if pi is constructible, root pi will be constructible by ruler and compass. So question was about the constructibility of pi. And there came this proof that pi is transcendental. So what is transcendental? You know, these real numbers are formally divided in exactly two parts. One is algebraic, the other is transcendental. All rational numbers are algebraic. Many irrational numbers are still algebraic, but there are some numbers which goes beyond the capacity, transcends the power of algebra. In the sense, you cannot have it as a root of algebraic polynomial. That means one single variable polynomial with rational coefficients, or simplified as integral coefficients. You cannot have the number as a root of such polynomial. Then this is a transcendental number. It goes beyond the scope of algebra, transcends algebra. That's how it is transcendental. It has been proved that pi is transcendental. So what? We can prove, and we will today, will show that every constructible number is algebraic. Every constructible number is algebraic. So pi being transcendental, it is not constructible. Actually, this can be put into a very nice argument by method of negation to justify the impossibility of that construction of root pi. You see, if possible, if pi is not transcendental, then it has to be algebraic. So suppose if possible pi is algebraic, then this is the result of Lindemann, that e to the power alpha is transcendental for every non-zero algebraic number alpha. So if pi is algebraic, e to the power pi is transcendental. In fact, we will also take another number, that is I, that imaginary unit. So root of x square plus 1 equal to 0, algebraic. Root of a polynomial equation in one variable with integral coefficient. So pi, if we assume to begin with, suppose pi is algebraic, then I is algebraic. So pi into I, that is still algebraic. The algebraic numbers, in fact, they make a field if you know the formal language of field. So pi into I is algebraic. So e to the power pi I, by this theorem written in blue at the end of this slide, e to the power pi I should be transcendental. But then that's a famous Eulerian identity, to the power pi I plus 1 equal to 0, that I actually read the other day, yesterday, in my chart, if you remember that. So e to the power pi I is minus 1, and that is turning out to be transcendental, which is false. So the initial assumption, if possible, let pi be algebraic, must be wrong. So pi is transcendental. And because it is transcendental, and because it can be proved, as we will prove later on today, that every constructible number is algebraic, not the other way around. I'm not telling every algebraic number is constructible, not at all. But constructible numbers, they form a subset of the set of algebraic numbers. So this being transcendental, it's not constructible, hence the fate of the fourth problem is sealed. It cannot be done. Now, before I go to the next slide, go to the second point, this Gaussian result of 1801. This itself gives a proof of impossibility of angle trisection in general. Some of my young friend yesterday asked me about this particular question, that is regular nonagon constructible? You can see the Gaussian result here. A regular polygon of n side is constructible if and only if n is of this specific form. So necessary and sufficient, both parties now known. So we can use it here. If I take a nonagon, a regular nonagon, that means 9 sides of equal length and equal internal angle. Then what is the number 9? In this form, 9 is actually 2 to the power 0, 3, 3. 3 into 3. So 3 is Fermat prime, fine, but it is not a product of distinct Fermat prime. It fails here. So regular nonagon is not constructible. And that actually shows that angle cannot be trisected in general. How? Well, if regular nonagon is constructible, then what is the angle at the center? Subtended by this length of a side of a nonagon. If you think it as an inscribed figure in a circle, then the angle at the center is 40 degrees. So regular nonagon is not constructible. Hence 40-degree angle is not constructible. Because had 40 degree been constructible, then at the center you construct 40 degree and you get that chord, these arms of the angle meeting at the circle, the 2 points, and that give you the chord which would have been the length of this required regular nonagon. That is not possible. That is proved algebraically. So 40-degree angle is not constructible. And if 40 degree is not constructible, 60 degree cannot be trisected. Because if 60 degree can be trisected, then one trisector has to be, 40 and 20 division. So 40 degree becomes constructible in that case. So this shows in a passive manner, using this result in one line, that angle trisection by ruler and compass in general is not possible. Because this is one single counter example. I told you the other day, sure enough, you are quite aware of this flavor of this argument in mathematics, that you want to nullify something, one single counter example is good enough. So this is a counter example here. Okay, I will also do the other direct beautiful proof given by Wandjel. I'll come to that later on. So this is the present state of affair. Let me proceed further. So this is here Gauss, as I told you already in this book, Disquisition et Arithmetic, when he was in only 19 years, younger than most of my young friends sitting over here. So this giant of a mathematician, he proved this result. So for instance, for example, say 255 gone, it can be constructed. Because you just factorize 255, you see the numbers are 3, 5, 17. So these are distinct Fermat primes. 256 gone, Fine, because it's no odd factors there. It's 2 to the power k. 257, sure, because it's Fermat prime. 258, no. Why? Because if factorize in prime factors, it's 2, 3, and 43. So that's not Fermat prime. Simple enough. And this is what Gauss has commented in the last page there, when he is making a list of all possible polygons less than 300 number of sides, regular polygons. He made a list that those are possible to construct by ruler and compass construction by his method. By logically, I mean, once again, please understand that these constructions geometrically are not provided. Argument has been provided to justify that this has to be constructible. And one specific argument for that Gauss did in details was for regular 17 gun, the very first number after 3, 5, the very first number of sides of regular polygon that was not available at that point of time. It was not done by Greeks. But Gauss gave an elaborate argument for that. And there he said, without proof, that such construction do not exist for 9 gon or 25 gon. He also wrote that he could prove in all rigor that these higher degree equations involved in this equation cannot be avoided in any way, and added, the limit of the present work exclude this demonstration here. So it was the other part, the necessity part of his argument that was not there, as I have already pointed out, that was filled up in 1837 by Pierre Wenzel. Right? Now, what did Gauss actually do? The whole thing I cannot discuss here. That's I'll give you reference if you want, but I'll give you the idea of what Gauss did and try to imitate Gauss with one example, which will be a bit smaller in computational aspects, so that I can easily make you understand the spirit of Gaussian argument here. This is the list on the top of the page you see. This is the list given by Gauss. These are the n-sided polygons. These are the values of n less than 300 for which ruler and compass construction is possible. Because for these numbers, you can see, if you just break them, it will obey that Gaussian theorem. 2 to the power k into P1, P2, P3, etc., where these are distinct Fermat primes. These numbers are of this form. And once you know, this is also easy to verify that once you know 10 is of this kind, 2 into 5, and then immediately, if 10 is possible, then 20 is possible, 20 is possible, then 40 is possible, 40 is possible, then 80 is possible, 80 is possible, then 160 is possible, like that. As I told you yesterday, bisecting the angle at the center of the circle, you can always get a polygon of 2 n sides from a polygon of n sides. So using all this, the complete list of possible n-sided polygons, regular polygons that can be managed, that is given by Gauss, and this is the very last page of his fantastic book. But what actually he discussed about this 17 gon, he discussed in details an algebraic idea. He actually constructed several equations, nested quadratic equations, and solving them. One quadratic solution of one quadratic gave the idea of coefficient of the next higher quadratic, and so on and on and on. In a kind of nested quadratic, he solved, and ultimately he proved that this expression, as you can see at the bottom of my slide, cos 2 pi by 17 is this expression, which is constructible. That is what actually he did. So let me explain a little bit. 2 pi by 17, by now you should immediately able to connect. 2 pi by 17 is the required angle at the center for the 17 gon. What Gauss is doing, Gauss is proving that cos of this particular theta is a constructible number. Why this right hand side is constructible? That I will explain. That I will explain not with this particular expression, but a similar expression. I will give you the spirit of the argument, which you will be immediately able to connect with this particular expression as well. Deriving this expression would have been very, very time consuming. It's a very lengthy process. So I'm not getting into precisely this. I will discuss a similar problem with less number of sides and show you the spirit of Gaussian argument. But how this argument stands finally, what if I get this cos theta to be a constructible number, constructible in the sense of ruler and compass construction? Well, you see, the argument is pretty simple, that you have a circle with a unit radius, any radius that you declare as your unit. And on that unit radius, then you can mark off this length, cos theta, which is surely less than 1. So you start with a circle of unit radius, and on the radius from the center, you mark off the length of cos theta. And at that point, you erect a perpendicular. These are all within your means of your ruler and compass construction. So you just you just erect a perpendicular and let that perpendicular meet the circle. The point where it meets, surely that point is cos theta sin theta. If you take this origin, this center of the circle as your declared origin, then this point on the circle surely is cos theta sin theta. And if you join, because if you join that point with the origin, that is once again a one unit. This is a right angle triangle. One unit is the radius, which is playing the role of it's a right angle circle triangle, and this is base is cos theta, this side is sin theta, because this is one, the hypotenuse. So immediately the point you get is cos theta sin theta, and with that point and the original radius that you have drawn, if you join these 2 points as a chord, that chord is subtending the angle theta as the center. That means the angle theta becomes constructible, and immediately that chord becomes constructible with reference to this theta. So if you can justify this argument, I hope you could see it, what I wanted to show. Or else you just draw it in your white sheet of paper in front of you, will be obvious. And then you see that if I can get hold of cos theta as a constructible length, immediately I can construct the angle theta as the center. And once I construct this angle theta as the center, then I just draw the chord where this arm of the angle is meeting the circle, and I get the required length, which only had to be replicated again and again to complete the construction of the would-be polygon. So that's what was the spirit of Gaussian argument. Only this part is left. How to justify that this peculiar looking, nested root within root within root, this kind of nested peculiar looking expression is a constructible expression. What is the guarantee that this peculiar number can be constructed by ruler and compass? So I will now try to go to that part. That is algebraization of geometry. How can all constructible numbers be characterized? So once this question is answered, it is easily seen that none of the 4 classical problems that we have mentioned already, they don't fall in this class, and hence cannot be solved by straight edge and compass. So if I can characterize the constructible numbers, then my job is done. It'll be easy to show that the algebraic equivalent of those geometric problems lead to some number which are not constructible by ruler and compass. So the key is a translation of geometric problem in the language of algebra. So any geometric construction problem is essentially of the following type. A certain set of line segments are given, and one or more other segments are sought. Segment in the sense of, intersecting points. You get 2 intersecting points means you are getting a segment of that. In that sense, you may be thinking, what about the angles? If I want to construct angle, you only talk about segments. You see here, angles in this spirit is thought about an angle to be constructed at the center of a circle, which is possible equivalently when we get the corresponding chord as a segment. Once that chord on the circle is achieved, then you just draw the endpoints, you join them with the center, you get the corresponding angle. So getting hold of an angle is equivalent to getting hold of that corresponding chord on that circle for which the angle is at the center. So in that sense, the geometric construction then amounts to solving an algebraic problem as follows. So first we must find an equational relationship between the required quantity and the given quantities. Then we must find unknown quantity x by solving the equation. That is pure algebra. This part is interesting. This part is the bridge. Finally, we must decide whether this solution can be obtained by algebraic processes that corresponds to ruler and compass construction. Remember that peculiar number by Gauss, cos 2 pi by 17, that huge expression? So that's how you find some equational relationship, keep on solving it, and ultimately reach that this is your unknown thing. If I can manage this to be constructible, then my job is done. So that is where the third point comes. We must now determine whether this solution can be obtained by the algebraic processes that corresponds to the ruler and compass construction. Okay, so this is the definition. Given an unmarked ruler, a compass, and a unit length, any length declared as unit length, what other lengths can be constructed? A real number alpha is called constructible. So this is the formal definition of constructible number. A number is called constructible by means of straight edge and compass and a line segment of unit length. If we can construct a line segment of length mod alpha in finite number of steps. If that can be done, I call that number as a constructible number. I can construct, if I can using this instrument, I can construct the length mod alpha. So I allow both positive negative numbers to be called constructible accordingly, because I'll be constructing the length mod alpha. And it follows from plane geometry that if A and B, where B not equal to 0, are constructible numbers, then their sum, their difference, their product, their quotient, these are all constructible numbers. The rational algebraic process among constructible number leads to another constructible number only. These four fundamental operations of arithmetic: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, of course, excluding division by 0, among constructible numbers, keep them constructible. That can be justified in no time. This is routine. So suppose this is, this is A, the addition. It's self-evident. You can see it here. A is a segment. B, you just take the next segment B on the same line in the same direction. Then what you get is A plus B. This is as simple as anything. Similarly, subtraction. You have A, you have B. You want A minus B, just do it. Take B in the opposite direction from the endpoint of A, and what you get is A minus B. Multiplication, a bit more involved, but still simple. Simple, class 8-9 argument. So this is what you do. The unit length is there, given, and this is A, and that is B. The angle is just arbitrary. Any angle would do. So A and B are taken according to the two sides, along the two sides of this angle, and then this unit, you just join this endpoints of join the endpoints of 1 and B and draw that other line parallel to it. I just repeat the construction, and then just you apply the similarity of the triangles, equiangularity. Sides are proportional. That leads to the segment of length A into B. See, I'm not multiplying A into B here. What I am trying is to justify that the length A into B, having the idea of the length A and length B, lengths, not numbers, I can construct the length AB by this method. So that's how I'm connecting my machine with the algebraic idea of constructibility, that being a constructible number. So 1 is given, A is given, it's a constructible number, B is another number. And then what I do is join this 1 and B and draw a line from this endpoint of A, which is parallel to this line. Then I can show that this total length is AB, which is quite obvious, I think, right? Because these are sides of the equiangular triangle bearing same proportion, which you can easily check and find that new length that I get on this arm is actually AB. That is a final. I hope this is quite clear. So that line is joined. The other one parallel to it. And you see the smaller and the larger triangle similar. And these are equiangular, so the sides are proportional. So immediately you get that that part is AB. Division is very similar, but not same, but very similar, as you can check. A little bit difference is there. This is 1. This is whole B here and the whole A. And now I join the endpoint of A with the endpoint of B. And then I draw this line here from the endpoint of 1. And what I get, this new length here, this length is A by B. The argument is exactly similar. Equiangularity and the sides being proportional. So that is understood. So these rational algebraic processes, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division of the known quantities, they can be performed by geometric constructions. So the complete totality of all such numbers that can be constructed by this machine, starting with some such number which is constructible. This totality is called a number field. Number field generated by those initial expressions, initial numbers, initial lengths. That is the idea of a number field. It's very, very similar to the abstract idea of a field. You know, what do you do in a field in abstract algebra? These are elements where you have two operations, addition and multiplication, and you are free to do addition, multiplication, and their inverse operations, subtractions and divisions freely, except division by 0. That's what a field is. So here we are having a number field where the situation is this, that I have these constructible numbers and all possible rational operations are permitted: addition, multiplication, subtraction, division. And this process shows that outcome of all these possible operations still are within this structure. So this structure is called a number field. And you can easily see that the real numbers, rational numbers, complex numbers, they form such fields. Okay. Now, what I want is to go beyond the field. I start with such a number field, like the field of reals, maybe, field of rationals, maybe, but I want to step beyond the field. Will my instrument allow me to do that? Answer is yes. Construction of square root, extraction of the root of a number, that will allow me to go beyond the field. That will produce something, some length, which is not within the field. Again, try to understand the connection between algebra and geometry. Geometrically, I am trying to get hold of this root A being a member of this number field. It is there, but I show that once I construct root A, it may not be there. It goes beyond the field. Like you start with the rational field, you construct root 2, it goes beyond. So this is compass and straight edge that allow me to step beyond my field. And the construction is quite well known, as you can see also depicted in front of you dynamically. It is in Madhyamik, in class 10 standard, I think, construction of square root. So it's not a mensuration. You are not asked to find the value of square root of A, algebraically or arithmetically. That leads to something for which you don't have an exact decimal expression. That's the precision of geometry here. Here geometry in certain sense wins. That here you have a specific length which is root 2. No questioning that. That length is root 2. But if you want to have value of root 2 in decimals, then there is no end to it. The 1.414 and on and on and on and on forever. Irrational number. That's the nature of these irrational numbers. But once you construct geometrically root 2, root 3, or root 5, you get exact length. That length is precisely that root A. So that exact computation of root A is possible by my machine. And what I find is this: if I start with, say, rational field, then I am able to construct a number. So that number has to be sort of constructible by my machine. It's a real number, and I can construct that length. So that is constructible, but that goes beyond my initial or beginning number field. Clear enough? So now, before taking the next step, that what to do with this kind of new kind of numbers, how I can manage them, and how far can I go with them, I just come back and try to justify that Gaussian spirit of argument. The argument from which that nested roots and roots and roots in that cos 2 pi by 17 was seen. So not 17, rather, let us judge the constructibility a la Gauss for a decagon. Forget it for the time being that we know decagon is constructible. Suppose we have no idea of it. How can we try to logically justify that it is constructible? And parallelly, try to appreciate that this constructibility argument will never tell you how actually you need to construct this regular decagon. So that's the Gaussian spirit. What he did, justified that 17 gon, a regular 17 gon, is constructible by constructing an expression which is a constructible number. Here, start with this argument. Suppose this regular decagon is a achievable thing, constructible thing, then suppose this arbitrary length AB, as you can see in front of you, suppose this AB is one side of it. Then what is the conclusion? How can I reach either a contradiction, justifying that hence this is not possible, or reaching some expression which is surely possible to attain for this AB? Can I reach that? Simple geometry will help. So you just join the origin, the center, AOB. Because it's proposed to be a decagon, this angle here is 36 degrees. Sure, at the center. 2 pi by 10. So if it is 36 and you see that this is an isosceles triangle, these base angles are equal, that has to be 72 each of them. 72, 72, 36. So what I do is I bisect this 72 degree at A. This is the dotted line there, bisection. Once I do this bisection, then now these two angles are again 36, 36. And look at this smaller erected triangle here, smaller triangle upright. Now the top angle of this smaller triangle is 36. And this was already 72. And this is also 72 because the three angles has to be 180. So that is a smaller replica of the larger triangle OAB, equiangular, because this was 36, 72, 72, and the smaller one is 36, 72, 72 as well. Equiangular triangle, their sides will be proportional. So if I begin with the assumption that the radius of the circle is 1, I begin with the assumption that radius of the circle is 1 and this unknown length of the side of the would-be, if possible, decagon is x. Then this is quite evident from the value of the angles that if this is x, this is an isosceles triangle, so that side should also be x. And you see, because this angle here is now 36 after bisection, so this is 36 and that is 36, that means this must also be x. Because this again, as I am trying to show you on the screen, is another isosceles triangle. So if that is x, this must also be x. Now the whole radius is 1 unit, so the rest of the part is 1 minus x. So then you go by proportionality. It is 1 by x in the large triangle. In the large triangle, it is 1 by the base x. In the smaller triangle, it is x by 1 minus x. They should be equal. So that's the equational formation as I have professed. Then I have to understand the geometry. I have to convert it into a equational relationship and try and solve it. So I solve this equation 1 by x equal to x by 1 minus x. That leads to an equation x square plus x minus 1. Thanks to Sridharacharya method, I solve it and I find that this x is root 5 minus 1 by 2, which is actually 1 by the golden ratio. But that's not important. The important thing is that this x turns out to be root 5 minus 1 by 2, just like that cos 2 pi by 17 turned out to be some apparently clumsy looking thing. But I tell you, the spirit of that expression, the character of that expression is exactly same as this simple looking expression here, root 5 minus 1 by 2. See, it is constructible. Why? We know root 5 is constructible. We know minus subtraction is constructible by my machine. So root 5 minus 1, theoretically I can construct. Division, constructible. So by 2 is constructible. The whole thing x is constructible. That means this AB is a constructible length. That justifies that this is a constructible, decagon is a constructible object. Exactly same is the spirit of that argument here in Gauss in a very involved and quite larger way. But apparently here you see one single square root. And in that Gaussian expression, if I just go back for 1 second to keep it in front of you. Yeah, you see, in spirit, in character, this is a similar expression. You have some numbers, they are quotients, additions, subtractions, multiplications, and extraction of roots. Not once, but many times. So what? If root 2 is a constructible thing, then you get a length of root 2. Forget about what it is. Now you find out the root of that length. It's quite possible. When you have a length A, you are not bothering. Your construction never bothers to know what this A is. 2, 3, 5, I don't care. The construction method works for any A which is known, for which you can construct another length which is geometrically justified to be the length of root A. So once root A is achieved, take that length, apply the construction on it. Surely you will get root of root A. And then again, do the same. You'll get root of root of root A. So no problem in constructing this nested root kind of lengths. That's the argument here. To justify that this Gaussian expression in the right hand side for cos 2 pi by 17 is theoretically a constructible number. And again, that does not tell you how to actually construct it, right? And that is not the point actually. That is not important. So I just go back to where I was. So now this argument is done. I come back to the story of Gauss. As I told you already so many times, that Gauss didn't tell how to construct it. It was done by this gentleman, Erschinger. He gave a construction method. I'll show you that. See, mathematically, as a student of mathematics, I hope you will appreciate this point. Once the existence of the thing is known, the interest is, 90% reduced. It can be done. It is known. Then the rest is, okay, if you are interested, spend your time on that. Surely someday you will be able to hit a correct method if you are ingenious enough. But that's a kind of, draftsman job. It's not, deep mathematics anymore. Once the existence is proved. If your construction itself is the proof of its existence, then the construction is very important. That by construction, physically you justify that it is possible to construct. But the other aspect, the Gaussian aspect of this existential proof, is a complete new paradigm that logically I say it is possible. And then I have no interest in it any further. Because I have proved it's possible. And if you have enough time you spend, someday we'll hit it. But I am not interested. Maybe that's why these kind of things are now a part of what is known as recreational mathematics. Good to spend time on, much better than wasting your time on Facebooks and WhatsApp. But then it's not deep research anymore because it has been proved that this is possible. So that's how Erschinger did a construction. Gentleman Richelieu in 1832 actually gave a construction of this regular 257 gone. And then this 65,537 gone, it is claimed by a gentleman Hermes in 1894 that it took him 10 years and completing this 200-page manuscript for the construction of this 65,537 gone. And very interestingly, another great name, John Conway, he has cast some doubt on the validity of this construction. But the fact remains that nobody either, tried to justify Conway or justify Hermes. It is so complicated and in a sense so useless of your energy and time to try and see whether this is really true, whether he is right or Conway is right. Well, mathematically it has got very less significance. But then of course, as I told you, it's much better to waste time on these things than many other things. So it's someone's own privilege. He or she can think that he will spend time on it as a kind of pastime. I'll just show you. I'm not getting those large things, but just the heptadecagon construction. If I show you, you will see why this is useless. I think is no explanation needed. Explanations are available why the construction works, but you see the construction and see the number of steps to the left top that is being written in the animation. Already 10 steps taken, 11, 12, 32. And then it goes on and on and on, and things become looking, completely jumbled up, clumsy. Yeah. Allow me to have a cup of tea by that time, and you see what wastage of time this is. But then, yes, this leads to a construction of regular 17 gone. Sure enough, you see the reason that Gauss didn't have interest or time to spend on these kind of things. He proved that it is possible and left it there. Went for something more brilliant, something more interesting for him. So you see, I think I can just stop it here and proceed further because it's only 41 steps now. It'll go to some 64 or 70 like that. And then it will give you the final construction. So I think you understand my spirit. So now comes this beautiful chart that shows you the state of affairs with Gauss at this particular juncture where we are. Yes.
Sir, yeah.
The time is up.
You can finish. Yeah, you can finish.
I'll just finish it up here. That's a nice place to stop. This is a chart that tells you the state of affairs as far as we are now. Now, not in the sense of 2021, now in the sense of my lecture. It shows some numbers are in yellow. So these are the numbers of these polygon sides, regular polygon side. Those are the N for the polygon, which were constructible by Greece. It was known to the Greek period, Greek people. Then you see the green one, starting with 17, then 34, 51, 3 into 17, Fermat prime. So these are Gauss's contribution. And then you see the blue ones. These are the numbers which can be managed. These polygons, these sided polygons can be managed with an extra input of either a Neusis or an angle trisector, tomahawk. So these are the situation when you want to stop with your ability to trisect an angle. But then naturally the question comes, what about the others? You see there are 11, a very simple number. 11 gone is beyond this construction process still now. What about it? What do I require to know? Or is it simply impossible? If angle trisection expands the breadth of the limit, what if I go for further higher, like quintisection, dividing in 5 parts? So highlighted in yellow are the numbers that Greek could manage, highlighted in green are added by Gauss, highlighted in blue are polygons that can be constructed using Mart ruler, and the remaining number represent polygons that would require ability to divide an angle into more than 3 equal parts. More than 3 equal parts. I'll come to that after the break. So let us take the break here.